Welcome to the interview on the Raptors Republic Podcast Network. I'm Andrew Damelin, and we continue our series on the Raptors 905. Today, we have someone who coached two of the players on the current roster. One is Gary Payton II. The other is his son, Coach Tinkle. He is head coach of the Oregon State Beavers, Wayne Tinkle. Wayne, the first question I have for you. Trace talks constantly about being overlooked, and people didn't think he would succeed in the Pac-12. And I was wondering, he says he uses that as fuel, as motivation. And I was wondering where you come in terms of providing that fuel.
Well, we've always kind of been, when they grew up, we coached them on two things, all of our kids, effort and attitude. And we just said, no matter what the environment is or who the opponent is, those are the two things you can control. And it helped to develop a chip on his shoulder. And then as he started playing a little bit of travel ball, and he's playing mostly with Montana and Idaho kids, playing against some of the bigger teams from bigger areas, there was, mumblings and, these kids from, Montana and they can't play and this, that, and the other. And so I think that really got under his skin that, he wanted to prove a point that no matter where you're from, you put in the time and the effort, you can get results. And so I think it was developed a little bit through our workman-like way that we raised our children, and then what he just kind of experienced growing up and starting to play travel ball and that sort of thing. And he's used it as motivation. He's always loved trying to not necessarily prove people wrong, but keep that chip on his shoulder, to keep developing his strengths and confidence in what he's capable of doing.
And like you said, he had a family reputation to live up to with his sisters being successful Division I players as well. And there were so many impressive statistics that Trace put up while at OSU. The all-time leading scorer, all-time leader in free throws made, consecutive free throws made, 3-time All-Pac-12. But the most impressive stat for me anyway was 96 consecutive games scoring in double figures. There are a lot of great players in college basketball and in the NBA who don't have that kind of consistency. So to me, it feels like it's more than just hard work. Is there something tangible or intangible, whatever you like, that led to that level of consistency?
Well, I just, it'd be easy to say the time that he's put in and the focus, but it's more speaks to his versatility. I think if he was a one-dimensional player, you probably wouldn't see that stat. And that's a stat that had lasted since the early 1960s. So you look at all the players that came through Oregon State, and that really says a lot. And he's a guy that can do a lot of different things, and he's excited, for what's next because he knows, eventually there's going to be an organization that understands and appreciates and will utilize, all of his abilities. And it's not just scoring, but it's playmaking, it's assisting, being a disruptive defender where some people might say, well, he's a step slow for his position, but they don't understand. He's got a 7-foot wingspan. He's got a high IQ and how bad he wants to defend. That's something I think at the next level you don't find in every player, and he's a guy that can make things happen because of his length and his IQ defensively, deflection, steals, and then offensively as well. He's not just a scorer. He's an assist guy. He kind of get, that hockey assist we mention a lot, the pass that leads to the assist. And I think those are the things when you look at all that he accomplished here at Oregon State, it's not just scoring, but I think there's 17 categories where he's maybe in the top 10. And, that just speaks volumes for how versatile he is.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned his scouting report. That was actually my next question. And, he himself compared himself, and it's easy, but I feel less badly comparing him to Manu Ginobili because he's a lefty, obviously. But your son also made that comparison too. And he's got that little herky-jerky game that you've seen in spurts in the G League so far. Yes. And he's through 6 games now. And obviously it's been he's playing a little bit of a lesser role right now, feeling things out around 10 minutes a game. But I just want to ask you, the first game he checks in February 10th, do you remember how you felt when he checked into that game for his first professional minutes?
Well, it's probably the first time that I've been nervous for him since maybe his freshman year here, just, when he first checked into that first game. I mean, my palms were sweaty and just excited. And, you know, all the while, remember this last few months brought back so many memories of my early career and everything I went through as a professional player. And now seeing your son go through that, you know, brought a lot of excitement and some nervousness. And, you know, obviously he's got some great players on that team, and he's kind of going through the rookie stuff. But, you know, we're confident that when he gets his opportunity, everything that he did at the Pac-12 level collegiately is going to translate. And that's one thing that we're continuing to assure him of.
And he still has over half the season to go. I mean, what is a season? It's a 15-game sprint to the finish, but he does have time to still get back. You know, Malachi Flynn got called up, so perhaps he gets some more run in that way. So we definitely wish him luck. And if we could move on to the other player, if you will, Gary Payton II.
Yeah, you bet.
And so I wanted to ask you about the first time you met him. Now, I'm reading the story 7 years after the fact, so I wonder if you still recollect the same thing. But you were scouting him at Salt Lake City Community College when you were still coaching at Montana. And you remember him going up to you and you having a positive interaction. What can you recollect about that moment about 7 years ago?
Yeah, it was funny because we went to watch multiple players on his team. And so it wasn't like we were just there for him. And there was just myself and one other assistant in the gym and sitting in chairs at midcourt, you know, probably 10 feet off the sideline. And when practice and conditioning and everything was over, he walked up, introduced himself, and thanked us for coming to watch, you know, them practice. You know, he didn't say, "Thanks for watching me." He said, "Coach, we really, it's great to meet you. We really appreciate you coming to watch us work out." And I just thought, wow, you know, and I didn't have any preconceived ideas of what kind of kid he was or anything, but that was really impressive. You know, a lot of times the head coach will call the players over and say, "Hey, you know, thank these guys for being here. Introduce yourself." He did it willingly and on his own. And so then, boom, you know, it was basically a year and a half later. You know, he had signed with the head coach prior to me, but then I got here in May, and he was going to be entering Oregon State the following September. And it was just kind of neat that, wow, okay, Gary's here. I'm going to get a chance to coach him. And the funny thing is, when I went down the list of recruits, and there was only a couple of them that had been committed for the following year, but I felt like I needed to reach out, introduce myself, and start the recruiting process over again. And I called Gary. He says, "Coach," he goes, I already know about you and all you've done. You don't have to recruit me. I'm an Oregon State Beaver. I can't wait to get out there." And it was just such a relief, you know, to get to hear that from him and to know that he was fully on board. Obviously, the staff prior to me really sold him on Oregon State. His dad's, you know, career here was incredible. So it just a couple of neat first impressions from him that really reassured that we had a winner on our hands in GP2.
Yeah, so you knew that you had a good person on your hand, but you also said later on that you were surprised at how great of a player he became. What about his game surprised you?
Well, you know, he wasn't that heavily recruited early on, and the thing that caught me is the impact he had on our play. Whether it was scoring, rebounding, defending. I mean, the guy that, you know, whenever Gary was involved with a quote unquote 50-50 ball, we called them 100% balls because he always came away with them. He earned more freedom from me defensively because of his ability to make up for a mistake, like gambling in a passing lane. You yell at your guys, "Don't gamble," then your guy back cuts you, but he would always come back and block the shot, you know, at the rim, or rake the ball out of their hands when he recovered. He was so quick to get back and make a play, and just an amazing athlete that, you know, we enjoyed coaching, you know. And the thing about his senior year, when Trace and the other freshmen, our first true recruiting class, entered, was the leadership he showed. You know, a lot of times you might have a senior, you know, kind of be a little jealous or envious of this incredible recruiting class. I think it was top 15 in the country. He knew we needed those guys to have success. So he really embraced each and every one of them. In fact, there was times when I was, pretty hard on Trace, and Trace tried to. He was smart. Trace tried to fit in early on. He didn't want to be, the coach's son, and so at times he was a little bit passive offensively, and I would have to get after him. We need you to score, be aggressive, be the playmaker we know you can be. But there were times Gary would come over to me and said, "Coach Tinks, I've got him. Step back, let me handle it." And he'd go put his arm around him, and encourage him through, and just showed great leadership, not just to Trace, but to the other freshmen as well. And again, that was just like something that was, blew me away. Like what an incredible leader this kid. He's not also just a gifted player, but great leadership qualities too, which I'm sure everybody with the 905 club sees day in and day out.
What's blowing me away when you're talking about the contributions Gary has made on the court, he's done like the exact same things to a T in his 6-game stint with the 905. Yeah. You're talking about him running back on defense after a miss and literally taking the ball out of someone's hands with his own 2 hands and going back the other way, or coming up with a chase down block. Like, those things have already happened in this 5+ game window. And in terms of in terms of his leadership, he mentioned, he's coming off the bench, and you'd think someone who'd bounced around in the NBA this long, who'd kind of be pressing for at least a starter's job in the G League. He actually says he prefers to come off the bench because he gets to see how everything is flowing and see what the other team is doing, and then sort of react to it. So it's amazing that what holds true from 5-6 years ago is kind of the same thing right now with the 905. But if we could take a step back, just to one game in particular at OSU, not to bring up painful memories, but the first round of the NCAA tournament in 2016. Yeah, and Gary plays 39 minutes, goes 9 for 17, 19 points, has one gigantic dunk in transition that got everybody going, and you lose a close one to VCU. What are your memories of Gary during that game taking over, and then after that game in the locker room?
Well, just I think the demeanor and the tone he set in preparation. Now, you got to remember, that was the first time Oregon State had been back to the NCAA tournament in 26 years. And Trace broke his foot at the end of our regular season when our last 2 games were at USC, at UCLA. And he broke his foot in practice the night before the USC game. And it was an incredible blow to our team because Trace, even though he was a freshman, was second on our team in scoring, rebounding, assists, and steals to Gary. Gary was our leader in all those categories. So we lose to USC, and then Gary really rallied the troops at UCLA. Another freshman, Stevie Thompson, had a huge second half to beat that team, which basically assured us of an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. And the celebration in the locker room at UCLA, Gary was leading the way. Even Trace, as down as he was, Gary wrapping his arms around him, and then Selection Sunday when we saw our name up on the board and everybody celebrating, it was great. But then quickly, Gary turned his focus to, we're not done now. We need to now keep going. Let's get hungry and keep this thing, rolling. And we thought, the NCAA tournament selection committee wanted an answer on Trace, whether he was going to be able to play or not with regards to seeding. And we were honest. We didn't want it to cost us an NCAA bid, but we wanted to be honest so that we would get the appropriate seed. And we got a 7 seed once we told them, that Trace wasn't going to be able to play that first weekend, which was a surprise. We thought maybe we'd be a 10 seed. And so when we drew VCU, we knew it was going to be a heck of a game. And Gary took on the challenge. I mean, you talked about some of the plays he made in transition, but his defense set the tone as well. Unfortunately, we just didn't have enough other guys step up to take some pressure off of Gary to help him out in that game. But it was a great accomplishment, and Gary again showed great leadership to that point. And then afterwards, it wasn't like he just walked away. How encouraging he was to the group that was going to, quote unquote, take the baton from him moving forward and saying, okay, we got it started. You guys keep it going. You know what it took to get here. I'm going to be supporting you guys all the way. Let's continue to build this thing. So even on his way out, he showed incredible leadership. And then he came back several times and, worked out with the guys and stayed in touch with them all. So he's just a great kid with an incredible personality. And obviously I know his parents are really proud of the young man he is and, enjoying him on his journey through his career.
Yeah, he's had a crazy journey, before, of course, but before, in the early years of high school, he kind of soured on the game. And then once he met a good AAU coach and was able to dunk the ball, people were obviously comparing him to his father, and he wasn't enjoying that. And then when he kind of became his own person, that's when you started to see the joy on his face. And now he proceeds to the NBA. He's played 61 games. He's been like the property of like 6 or 7 organizations. And you'd think when speaking to him, he'd be kind of more of a hardened individual when asking about the game. But when I spoke with him a few days ago, there's a lot of joy still. And he's, even though there's been the doubts, he's still chasing that dream. And I wanted to ask you in a more general sense, before you got to OSU, the program had churned out one NBA player in the previous 25 years. That was Jared Cunningham. And since then, I'm sure you know the number. There have been 4 that have made it to the NBA. That's obviously Gary, Eric Moreland, who won a championship with the Raptors, actually.
Yes.
Drew Eubanks, who's definitely shown some promise, and Omari Johnson. Is there something about your recruiting and coaching style that lends itself to creating NBA talent, would you say?
Well, I think, what we did really well at Montana was recruit kind of the under the radar blue collar players, that we knew were a little raw and had a high ceiling. And, we've been able to do that a little bit here at Oregon State. And I'll be honest, we've had 3 sons on our team, sons of coaches, obviously Trace, my son, and Coach Thompson's 2 sons. That's inhibited us a little bit in the recruiting battles because, people will use it against you, like our whole program's just run around the Suns. But moving forward, and we've seen it in this year's class and who we've signed for next year, the level of player and the athletes, I think, will even lead to possibly, more down the road. But, the way we develop our players, I would say, is the biggest key. And it's the full on person, not just the basketball player, but the habits off the court and how those directly, relate to your habits on the court. Skill development, your outlook on the game. And if you really want to be a pro, don't just say it. You've got to kind of talk the walk a little bit or walk the talk, whatever that phrase is, and make sure that you're committing to living like a pro, eating like a pro, lifting like a pro, working out like a pro. And so those are the same things that we teach as far as academics. And so we feel like the players that come through our program are tested and developed. And I think that's becoming an attraction, to some of the organizations at the next level.
Yeah, you've obviously done a really nice job turning that program around, and like you said, made it to the tournament for the first time in a while back in 2016. And listen, Coach, we really, really appreciate the time. We've taken up enough of it. I hope you and everyone out in Corvallis is staying safe, and yes. We really appreciate it. And good luck the rest of the season.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Good luck to 905 and. Hopefully one day. I've been to Toronto once to have a little medical procedure done, and would love to get back there. It's a wonderful, wonderful city, a lot of good people, and all the best to you all.
Thank you. Have a great day.